All right, here's a question for you then. At this tournament, like, I don't think Bwipo has ever looked better than he did in this particular tournament. This was when, put it this way, I've obviously been not only his friend, but like a lifelong Soaz fan, basically. I think he's a fucking genius player. But I even have to say, when I watched some of those games, like, I can't hate on you. Like, fucking Bwipo was doing awesome, and he had the champions, and he even had that bizarre shit where he'd been like one trick Invictor years earlier, and then now he could use it in the tournament. Like, everything was so flawed. What was this like peak Bwipo tournament? Like, what type of player was he? How were we trying to use him?
It was, I think, a lot of months of him performing very well in scrims. So basically the entire narrative from the moment that Soaz injured himself and came back is Bwipo was winning more in scrims, and I could kind of sense that the players preferred playing with Bwipo. But Soaz was consistently playing better on stage, and he was getting the wins in, and that reflected itself in the finals where we started Bwipo because we thought that was the right thing to do because he was performing better in scrims.
Yes.
Lost this game, took out Soaz, brought in Soaz, won the next 3 games, and Soaz played well. And that was kind of the narrative where Bwipo was doing better in scrims, Soaz was doing better on stage, and then we go into Worlds, and again, the scrim winner rates with Bwipo were probably 20% higher than with Soaz. But so basically all of the bootcamp, which I think was like 3 weeks long, we're kind of planning to start Bwipo, but then right before World starts a few days, Soaz goes on his absolute tear, goes 12-0 in scrims with Sion, and guess what? We want to play the first game against Invictus Gaming. We want to draft Sion top lane. So we start Soaz, and he plays completely out of his mind. Probably one of the best games of his career, but we lose. And then we give Bwipo the try in the second half. It was a complete Hail Mary. It was more of a way of like, okay, Bwipo, you're doing good in scrims with carry champions. We're probably not good enough to beat IG. We have to do something a little bit crazy. I need to throw in an unknown factor or a surprise factor. I throw in Bwipo, and we beat IG twice. And that's where Bwipo solidified his starting position for the playoffs. And then on top of that, of course, there was like this random meta shift where suddenly out of nowhere Victor comes in the meta, and Bwipo had a few thousand games on Victor throughout his career because he just liked playing Victor in mid lane. So that just, it all came together.
In terms of, obviously, like, this was after this tournament, like, Soaz left the team, and he even says, like, part of it, he even says, by the way, because I know at the time everyone was like, it's just because of money, he wants to be paid, or, you know, he wants to start in spot. He claims in his Reflections interview that he even potentially might even have stayed as, like, you know, like, you share the spot. He just felt like he was, like, disrespected in a way. He felt like, you know, like, people didn't, like, you know, look, I'm a veteran, I've done all this, like, I'm always good, etc. Like, what would you say in that regard? Like, did you want to keep him in the team? Should you have run, like, a 6-man roster in your dream world? Would that be what you would have done? Would you ever have considered just staying with Soaz if the money's there? So what would you say to that angle?
No, I think it was pretty clear that we were going to start Bwipo because he was already, like I said, he was performing better in scrims quite consistently, had a good Worlds run, and for us it just made sense to keep on Bwipo. And yeah, maybe to get into the Soaz topic a bit, like Soaz probably hates my guts, and he has alluded to it a few times that he didn't like the Fnatic management, and I have to say that's me, mainly. Because, you know, in the end, I had to make a decision between 2 players to start on stage, and we could have beaten EDG perhaps in the quarterfinals or C9 in the semifinals with Soaz playing, but I kind of took that Worlds run away from him, or like he was more of a passenger, and I understand that it hurts. I also think that he's mature enough to also see that I just have to make the choice that I believe is the best for the team, if he looks back on that. And I do like him a lot as a person, so it really sucks, but I think our relationship soured quite a bit from that. Basically from the moment the injury happened, a few things happened that I didn't really like. So one lesson I learned from my father: if you have an very important conversation with someone, never do it alone. Have someone to back you up when things go wrong. So I had a conversation at the start, before when we started practicing. I think it was for MSI actually. We were practicing for MSI. Soaz was recovering. I said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Bwipo is gonna do 4 or 5 scrims a day. You're gonna get the other one and we're gonna slowly bring you back into the mix. And keeping in mind, I wanted Soaz to start at MSI because Bwipo played playoffs with us in the spring, but it wasn't very good. Like, his laning was very off. He was doing okay in team fights, but laning wise, you could see he was still a rookie. He was not ready for MSI at all. So I did want Soaz to play, but he couldn't even use all his fingers at the time. He had to rebind his mouse and his keyboard. He had to change his keys because his hand was still broken. So I said, you're going to play one game. Bwipo is going to play the rest. And of course, after the first day of practice, and I did this where Bwipo and Dylan were in the call as well. Soaz starts this first game, I believe, and then I put in Bwipo, and so I was like, what the fuck is this? Aren't we supposed to do 50-50?
Okay.
But Soaz apparently didn't get that message. Maybe because it was a 15-minute call, maybe he just kind of zoned out after a while, or when I talked about, listen, hey, Bwipo's going to play more scrims. It's entirely possible, but Soaz thinks that he was not communicated to properly, and that the same thing happened at World, so that's why he holds a grudge against me. Now, of course, there's always two sides to the story. But basically, to get back to the question, Bwipo had better scrim results. I could feel that the players preferred scrimming with Bwipo and playing with Bwipo, so that was kind of a done deal, and there wasn't really any plans for a 6-man roster at the time.
One of the reasons I definitely didn't think, I understood why Bwipo played, and again, I kind of agree with your characterization. In the spring playoffs, if anything, the way that you gave credit to Bwipo was like, wow, you actually filled in a team that's not like the team you were starting, and they still won. Wow, you must have just not lost the game. It's not that you were sick, you just didn't lose the game. Yeah, that's your job. And the problem is, of all the players in history, if there's anyone thinks like, oh, I've got my starting spot, it's going to be someone like Soaz, because he was so good for so many years. Yeah. I remember the year before you got there, where like he's basically the reason they even got out of that group stage mess where they were like down and they should have fucking got out of the group stage. Like he just put them on his back. And I noticed also as a top laner, he's one of the only top laners I've seen who actually like seem to have a better sense of like macro concepts than some of the fucking other players in the game, like the supports sometimes, because a lot of top laners, if people don't know, they just rely on like following orders, like, oh, shall I teleport now? Yes, press the button. Like this guy actually understood like how to play the map out and stuff. So give me some thoughts on him as a player. Like what were his strengths? What were his weaknesses?
I think he was a fantastic player, and that he was just really unlucky with the circumstances. And again, he was brilliant. He had good macro understanding. He knew his role. He knew how to play weak side, which particularly in that roster was very important on the way I wanted to play the game and how the team also saw the game. And he was fine with it, he was just going to tank the ganks and we're going to win and kill the Nexus. He was really fine with it, so that was perfect. His champion pool was fitting. He had the experience. He could also first-time champions. He's one of the all-time greats, and he was a fantastic player back then as well. And then we come just back, like Kiki's kind of benched himself. Soaz gets injured, which was kind of his own fault. Well, mainly, it was his own fault. I can say that now. And then Bwipo comes in the picture. Had that not happened, again, Bwipo would not have been scrimming as much with us. He wouldn't have played MSI. He wouldn't have played in the playoffs. He wouldn't have played probably in the summer. And we would have never heard of Bwipo, or he would have just gone on to another team most likely. But the injury happened, and suddenly a lot of things kick in motion, and Bwipo starts performing better and better and better. And now there's a reason to actually share scrim time in the summer, and Bwipo runs away with it.